Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this week's episode of Couch Trip Therapy for Everyday Life. That's Eddie Reece. I'm Billy Courtright, and we have another thought-provoking, hopefully inspiring episode for you today. If you're not inspired, but we were able to maybe poke and prod or clarify a few things, that would be equally beneficial for us, at least from our selfish perspective. So I'm going to start with a little bit of an anecdote or story, if you will. Recently, my wife and I were in the market for a vehicle, and we went across a couple dealerships. We ended up settling on a dealership that we found serviceable for us, and we purchased a vehicle, actually leased a vehicle for my wife to drive, and so far she's enjoying it. My wife is quiet, like she doesn't boast or complain very often. And the vehicle's in my name. So I will get to my point. I received a series of texts and emails and phone calls from the company for which we purchased the vehicle and the manufacturer as well. And I kept getting this question, well, Mr. Courtright, would you say you're completely satisfied with your experience at said dealership? And I was like, completely satisfied as opposed to partially satisfied, and they rank it in terms of 1 through 5. And interestingly enough, and I'm sure anybody who's ever purchased a vehicle can relate, the sales representative and the finance person who handled our business was pretty thorough in prepping me for this interaction. And I was actually coached, and they said, listen, Mr. Courtright, you're going to receive a survey and a phone call. And I just want you to know that if for any reason you're not able to give us a 5 or 10, I can't remember the ranking, which is completely satisfied, will you please give me a call and let me know what I can do to lessen the gap between wherever you are to that completely satisfied? I said, yeah, yes. And I explained why that was important to their comp plan and ability to earn bonuses and so forth. And I got it. And to be completely fair, it was a fairly delightful experience. It wasn't, as far as car buying goes, I would say it was one of the better ones. But it's just something about buying a car. It's not, it ain't vacation. It's a little different. So this term satisfaction is interesting, and I'm going to be transparent. I don't know if I've ever been completely satisfied with anything, because I just never know if something could get better. So I started thinking, and I have a question for Eddie, because we had a little back and forth in the green room, and I was thinking, well, in the context of satisfaction, as a lovely Mick Jagger sang about, I'm not saying I can't get none, but I don't know where I am on that spectrum. And I will say that there are certain areas of my life where I'm not satisfied at all. As a matter of fact, I would say I'm a little bit upset, frustrated, disconcerted, defeated, just generally icky feeling about that. And that whole story came to my mind as Eddie and I were just talking. So now that I've given Eddie kind of how my brain works, and he knows me well enough now to know how my brain works, and it's like no other. But I'm just going to pose this question. And it's that when we as individuals are dealing and experiencing a lack of contentment. And I don't know if contentment and satisfaction are the same thing, and we'll talk about it. But I think in many areas of my life, I would say, if given a survey from the manufacturer, that I am a 1 or even a 0. And that level of just, I'm not satisfied. I'm dissatisfied. I'm pissed. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I'm alone. I'm wild. I'm struggling. So what would you advise someone who is dealing with just a level of, I would say their satisfaction score is not not on the completely satisfied side of the equation. So what advice do you give folks that sit down and say, you know what, Mr. Reece, I'm just unhappy. I can't find a lot of satisfaction. Well, let's just leave it at that. Let's just start there. Like, what do you say to folks that kind of sit down and there's just a melancholy sense of dissatisfied?
Well, Billy, I'm glad you've chosen to come to therapy today.
My pleasure.
Boy, I mean, there's a lot there. One is I could talk for a long time about those satisfaction surveys. They're just horrible. It's a horrible way to run a business, and they tend to kind of from what I understand, talking to people who jobs involve those sorts of things, and those things are looked at as, say, if the score is 1 to 5, 5 says you did a good job. Anything under 5, you're in trouble. So there's this sense of perfection that is expected. And I had a guy from AT&T installing my internet explain it to me. He's like, if I don't get a 10, then I either, there, and I can't remember exactly, but there were several things that would happen that were, some sort of remediation needed to take place because he didn't do everything he was supposed to do. And that's just nuts. I mean, and it also represents the things you're saying, I think, of when you have any sort of dissatisfaction, I don't really. Chances are you can start with what you expected, what you believed should be, you know, anxiety and you could also throw in there dissatisfaction, any sort of feeling like that, like is the difference between where you think something should be and where you believe it is. Both of those could be totally out of touch with reality, and generally are, especially the idea that, you know, I should be happy, and that's a mainstay of the clients that I get. I've lived this long, I've done everything right, and I'm not happy. How come? Well, because you were taught in this culture that if you do everything right, that will equal happiness. But doing things right and happiness don't really go together. There are plenty of people that do things wrong and they're happy. So those two things don't correlate. And shooting for happiness, which is maybe the most used term for all this stuff, is not a very noble goal. The more you focus on, I want to be happy, the more discontent you're going to have, I can guarantee you. Because when we expect something like that, psychologically, what I believe happens that we're unaware of is I say, I want to be happy. What I'm really saying neurologically is I want to be happy all the time. And I've suggested this to clients and I go, would that be okay with you to be happy all the time? And 9.5 times out of 10, they go, sure. And I go, okay, I can do that for you, but let's talk about it first. I want to make sure you really want to do it. And I've got a magic wand in here. I can wave it and you will be happy all the time. And so you'll walk out of here and you're going to go, yay. And then you get a phone call and your most beloved person in your life was just tragically killed. And you're going to go to the memorial service and go, hey, everybody, how's it going? Oh my God, everything's great. I'm so happy. I mean, is that really what you want? The better goal is I want to be human. I want to be fully human. I want to experience the depths of despair and the absolute nirvana of total elation. And I want to experience everything in between that. And I want to be able to experience it without a battle, without a fight.
Mm.
If my my beloved dies, I want to experience that without fighting to not grieve. I want to be able to take the wave of emotions that grief involves with ease,
Yeah.
which doesn't mean that it's easy or even pleasant. It's just that the internal dialogue that we've touched on in so many podcasts is not a fight of, gosh, I just read it just a half hour or so ago. I was looking at things about the masters, and somebody was saying that I was the way I was, or what I said, because I didn't want to cry on the camera. So there's a battle inside his head.
Hmm.
I want to cry, but I can't, or I shouldn't, or I don't. Yeah. So it's a back and forth. And so this idea of whatever's going on, you can experience it with ease, which means there's not that battle.
Right. Well, you know what? You touched on something I want you to feather it in because I think it's relevant, but you used the word expectation more than once. And at risk of sounding negative, this is just the reality, and it's a saying that we've likely heard before, or maybe not. And for those that are hearing it for the first time, take it for what it's worth. But the saying that expectation being the seed of future disappointment,
Mm.
where so many times in life, what we expect or the vision or expectation just doesn't come to pass. And to your
Right.
point of being satisfied or dissatisfied, if your expectation is Valhalla, or Nirvana,
Hmm.
and it's less than that, then what was the problem? Was the problem the experience, or was the problem the expectation? Either way, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter so much as you're now in a state of dissatisfaction. So
Right.
talk about that a little bit, if you would.
Well, like you said, I don't know that it really matters whether it was an expectation, a fantasy, as we talked about in a couple of our episodes, and it didn't come true because it never was going to come true. It doesn't matter. Now you're, ugh,
Yeah.
or really hurt or sad or disappointed, whatever. To be able to experience that with ease, you know, because generally when people have feelings, this is so tricky to define, feelings that they don't want, okay, then there's a battle.
Internally.
Cry, don't cry. Say this or don't say that. And so one of the tricks is to not talk about, not even have a concept of good, bad, right, wrong, negative, positive feeling. Right? Being really pissed is not a negative feeling. Being really happy is not a positive feeling. It's a feeling. Right? Because if you frame feelings as positive or negative, you're going to move toward the positive and away from the negative, which will then cause the negative to overwhelm the positive. Because that's like saying, okay, Billy, for the next 10 seconds, don't think about a zebra. So be positive, be positive, be positive. Don't be, which means don't be negative, don't be negative. You're already negative by saying that. Don't do that. Yeah, I gotta do this. Oh, you messed it up. So you're in that battle, and over the years, working with what I came to call the kindness dialogue, which is how we talk to ourselves internally, which is the same as how we talk and listen to somebody externally, is you do that with curiosity, kindness, and compassion. So if you learn to do that, then I think, and it's hard to come up with things that wouldn't be so much, but I think that we would all get what it is we really need. To reference the Stones again, can't always get what you want, but if you can't get what you need, I think most of us don't really know what it is we really want or need, whatever you want to call it, which is that we treat ourselves with ease. We treat ourselves with, which is curiosity, kindness, compassion. We explore these battles that we have, and through, what I call the kindness dialogue again, you learn that each side really wants the same thing, and then they can begin to work together to achieve that without the battle. And we may have infinite battles going on. I really don't know how many are in there. After a long time and a lot of therapy, I'm still battling with myself, which is part of the process, to find these two parts that are seemingly at odds, and then to go and explore that and go through the process again. That's what I think satisfaction, happiness, contentment, peace of mind, all those things that people talk about wanting, I think that's what it all boils down to.
Mm.
That internally you care about yourself. You're curious about yourself. You don't mistreat yourself. You don't abuse yourself. I'm never surprised, but it's always disheartening to hear a client talk and they don't even know they're doing it sometimes, share just how brutal they are to themselves. And if you listen to your thoughts from a bit of a distance, and whatever thought you have, ask yourself, would I say that to somebody I cared about the same situation? And the answer will always be no, unless you're just an asshole. Um, you would never talk to anybody the way you talk to yourself. So why
Well,
are you being
that is
so
the
mean?
question. So why where does that come from?
It comes from the way we were taught, or what I call training. We were trained to be that way. We were trained to be hard on ourselves. We were trained to motivate by instilling fear and shame. And so that's what we do, to the point that we don't even see that there's anything wrong with it unless somebody does it to us.
Tell me a little more about that. Like we were motivated by fear and shame, or we were trained in fear and shame. How I think I know what you mean, but can you clarify a little bit?
I'll almost, gosh, there's so many different examples. It's hard to settle on one. And what comes to mind, and if my client is watching this, he'll know I'm using his example because it's just so pure. He walks into the kitchen in the morning and his mother goes, "You're not wearing that shirt, are you?"
Mm,
Right then and there, he's being taught that he doesn't have the ability to make a good choice.
right.
Right then and there, he's being disapproved of. He's actually being shamed. You are not good enough. You are not good enough to pick out your own shirt, and you can run with that. I mean, if you kept going, you can't pick out your own shirt. I mean, you're so incompetent that you can't even do that. And you would think, if you just used just pure logic, if you were some kind of Vulcan, you would think that having that experience, you would never do that because it feels so horrible. But we do what we're taught to do. So if your caretakers do that to get you to change your shirt, which you do, and then they go, well, that looks a lot better, then that's what you're going to do, because who's teaching you anything differently? And if somehow you had absolutely perfect upbringing in terms of emotional, psychological upbringing, as soon as you walk outside into our culture, you're going to get slammed with all this.
Yeah.
Oh, you drive that car. Oh, you live in that kind of house. Oh, that's all the money you make. You know. Oh, your body doesn't look like everybody's ideal body. You're getting it poured on you all the time. So we're highly trained. I mean, we're ninjas at being mean. We really are, which is why it comes so easily to a lot of us.
Yeah.
Um, and primarily to ourselves. We go, oh, we're highly trained at being mean. People go, well, people aren't mean to me. Well, no, they're not. But, you don't walk around in the grocery store and people come up and go, you suck. But you're doing that to yourself all the time. And that's what we all, I think, want to be different in our lives is the way we treat ourselves. But again, we don't even know we're mistreating ourselves.
Yeah. No, that's very poignant. It's listening to you, I'm thinking about where we are today and, as we record this April of 2025 and it's judgment and compartmentalization and status and classism and, I mean, it's just everywhere.
Yeah.
And the way you just explained it, it's like, yes, it's rooted in perhaps it's rooted in that comment of, "Are you gonna wear that shirt?" Which we can all relate to, I think. But then if we are having that negative self-talk as a result of the way we were brought up, and then you're in this society today where it's coming at you from every channel of media, from every social platform, where there's just this constant, in my opinion, effort to put us into a bucket. And then there's this desire to be in a bucket you're not placed in. And I don't know if I'm explaining it the way I want to, the way I feel, what I feel from what you're saying, but I feel like we're right now, it's starting to make sense that we are who we are because of our upbringing and the aggregate of all of that input. And I'm not saying anybody was malintended. I don't know that my
Oh,
mom.
no. No, nobody says, "Let me see, what would be the best comment I could make to screw this kid up as much as possible?" I could do that, or I could say the nice thing that would be very encouraging and let them know I love them. Let me see, what am I gonna do? Nobody does that.
No, but in the context of
Yeah.
how we consume information now, there's an absence. I mean, it's nobody was trying to make you feel loved, appreciated, intelligent, informed, inspired. No, it's all about, if you don't think the way we should think you should be shamed. And it
Well, but yeah, there are plenty of people generally called influencers now, that are trying to make you feel loved and inspired and all that. And what most of them don't understand, is that they're also being very shaming. And I had this debate professionally a long, long time ago when positive psychology started getting some traction. There's no positive psychology. There's no negative psychology. Just like I was saying earlier, it's not negative or positive emotions. You don't use affirmations to make yourself feel better. That is the opposite of what you should be doing. If you have a part of you that says, "Oh, I really suck. I'm no good." Don't argue with yourself and go, "Oh no, I am wonderful just the way I am." Because that other side isn't going to go, "Oh, okay, I'm wonderful now." It's going to just roll its eyes at you. So you've got to get those two parts to sit down with each other and really listen with that curiosity, kindness, and compassion. I know people get tired of hearing me say that sometimes. I get tired of saying it sometimes. But that's really what it comes down to, in my opinion. So you can't fool yourself neurologically for very long. You can't, you know, affirm your way to happiness for very long. You have to be real with yourself. You have to go, God, there's this part of me that just berates the crap out of me. You know, I wonder what that's about. I wonder what's going on with him. And so tell me, you know? And so there's this other part and you go, well, I really suck. I can't seem to get anything I really want. So you really suck. You can't seem to get anything you really want. Now you're in the kindness dialogue and you're listening with curiosity, you want to get to this place of seeing the other's world the way they see it, not the way you see it. And when you achieve that, things change. I mean, and I've seen this time and time again with myself, with my clients, that you listen well enough, you keep your own opinions out of the way and really be curious. I'll say, look, even if the person you're listening to is completely delusional, if you really listen to their description of their world well enough, the conclusions that they come to will follow a logical progression. It will make sense. Make sense doesn't mean you agree with it. It will make sense. And you'll be able to, and it's response that you can't generate it on your own. It happens. You go, oh, okay, I get it, and you can feed back to them. This is your world, and if you do that well enough, they will go, yeah, and at that point, there's nothing to argue about. I get it. Of course you think that because of this and that. Well, yeah, who wouldn't?
Right.
Okay. And at that point, we're getting, I think, again, what we all really want that we don't know that we want is for somebody to, and there's just not a good way to describe this, but see us, hear us, understand us, be there with us, which is a validation that you exist and I see your existence, right? Which to me is one of the most powerful experiences a human can have because I think we all grow up with some degree of what is generally called an abandonment issue, but that's not what it is, in my opinion, because to be abandoned, you first have to be attached. And we never get that attachment. Okay? It wasn't like, oh, my parents fully saw me, heard me, validated me, and then they left me. That's not the way it works. The validation, for shorthand, never really happened. So we grow up kind of, and you made a comment, oh, something about your brain, like no other brain. No, your brain is just like everybody else's other brain, and your struggles are just like everybody. You are not unique, and none of us really are. So it's not an abandonment issue. It's an issue that you were never allowed, this part of you anyway, was never allowed to exist. And when a part of us that has lived in shame forever all of a sudden is seen and is able to be out, you know, and not shamed. Oh yeah, I get it, man. There's just nothing more powerful in my mind, and that's what love really is. That's what caring really is. Um, when you do that with somebody, for somebody, with yourself and for yourself, that's when things really change. So there's a quick lesson on what the kindness dialogue is, because that's how you get to what we originally started talking about is this thing of I feel content, I feel sad or happy or that I've achieved something. Even though when you feel that sense of, gosh, I'm seen, I've been heard, they see my world, and I'm not being shamed.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well,
Then
what I found the most fascinating about what you said there was when you talk about what I'll call opposition forces, and you
mm,
using the example of affirmations, when there's a voice inside your head that's saying things like you're not enough, you're not good enough, that'll never work.
mhm,
And then you have someone who will generally, maybe, perhaps, I don't claim to know, but may come to you with this depressive mentality of, I just don't feel like I'm good
Yeah.
enough. I don't feel like I'm smart enough. I feel like I'm cloaked in failure. And so there's this part of them that's the loudest. It's the voice in their head with the microphone, let's just say. And, then you see all over social media and the internet and books and in Barnes and Noble and everywhere that you mentioned the affirmations, like this idea that we could self-talk ourselves to a better place.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found completely fascinating is the only way you're going to, and this is, you're the therapist, so you may not like this word, but I'm going to use the word satiate. The only way you're going to satiate that place of beratement is to acknowledge it and
Mm-hmm.
address it in some way,
Yeah.
to perhaps satiate, satisfy, I don't know, but
It's
give that part of you the validation it needs so that
yeah.
perhaps this other part of you can be more coexisting. I don't know.
Well, I think the word is transformation.
Okay.
That it's not what I was trying to get to is if I have that experience of being seen, felt, heard, it's not happy, it's not satisfied, it's not content, it's transformed. It's born. It's not a rebirth, it's a birth, the when I was going through this in my own therapy, I came up with this image of that part of me behind this glass, and the whole rest of the world was outside of that, and I'm inside it, and I'm looking at the world that way. But it's really kind of a one-way thing. There's nobody out there that can see me back there, and I can't get out there. So this part of me was not allowed to exist. It wasn't allowed to come into the world. And so to me, that explains why I'm lonely. I feel alone. I feel really different from everybody else. I feel out of place. You're behind that glass and you can't get there. And so when we can do this with ourselves or with somebody else, and this is what really good therapy is this is what you do with clients. You bring those parts into existence and they're allowed and welcomed and not shamed and all those things. There's nothing like that. And I think that's what everybody's after. And that's one of the messages that I want to get out into the world as much as any of them is that this is what we're really after. This is how to get it. And it's not that hard to do. It's just not, I mean, to have a conversation. I've gone through it with myself. I've gone through it with clients, and it can be done within a few minutes.
Tell me more.
If, for the most part, clients struggle with doing this because the battle is just so ingrained. But if I can get usually a couple who really do want to work things out, really do care for each other, and they're either smart enough or maybe not smart enough to just follow the format. I don't really know what it takes. Just follow the format. Don't think about it. So you speak in short paragraphs, 2, 3 sentences. You repeat those 2 or 3 sentences back verbatim. All right. And then you speak again, and then you repeat it back again. And it generally doesn't take more than a few exchanges like that for the listener to be able to put together what in active listening, and it's been named all sorts of things, to put together that understanding or compassion statement of, oh, I get it. And you use their words verbatim. This, because of this, this. And again, if you do it well, they'll go, yeah. And I had the most dramatic example of this, I had a couple that had, they were, I think they'd been married for like 25, 27 years or something and having the same argument from, you know, probably when they first started dating. And I walked them through this, and it was one of those instances where it was a few minutes and they got to, yes. And it was like, yeah, that's what I've been trying to tell you all this time. But what had really been happening is the way the speaker said it that time, they had never said it that way. So they had never really said what they wanted to say. That's one of the beauties of this dialogue is the speaker learns to actually say things in a way they've never said it before, and they hear it differently. And then the listener hears it differently because this was the woman talking to the man, and he goes, "That's news to me." And she goes, "I've been trying to tell you for 27 years."
Yeah.
You know, it took a few minutes. So it's not that hard to do.
No, well, the level of difficulty might not be a lot, but awareness precedes progress. I mean, people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, and there's so much we don't know. I mean, I love astrophysics, and some 90 something percent. Everybody has a little different figure, but 90 something percent of the universe is dark matter, dark energy, and we don't really know what that is. And when I first learned that, I went, "Oh my God, that's the human mind." Carl Jung said that he had this picture of a giant mountain under the water, and the little tip of that mountain is all that we really know. And I think that's true. And so this exploration of yourself is, diving down into that as deep as you can go. And I think it's probably infinite, really, because in some sense, we're an incredibly complex organism, but we're not that complicated. I mean, I'm not very surprised by a lot of things, people tell me or things I see or whatever. It's people do what people do.
As we get to the end of our podcast here, I just a quick question to kind of sum up today's conversation in the form of some actionable or meaningful counsel or
Mhm.
inspiration, perhaps, to someone who might be listening to this, which
Yeah.
that isn't feeling so great. And maybe the answer I know, but I want to hear you say it. So, for the benefit of the audience listening or viewing, and then we'll wrap. But the advice, the direction, the counsel that you would give someone who, in the wake of hearing how simple, easy, not complicated it might be, but is still suffering, because part of me, part of me hears that and feels like, yeah, you make it sound so simple, but man, uh,
Yeah.
this has been going on for a
Yeah.
minute. But
I
what do you say to someone who's been maybe
think
carrying a bag of rocks figuratively
Well,
and doesn't?
if you're hearing me say this really is not that complicated, it's pretty simple, it's pretty easy, and you notice a part of you that rebels against that, maybe even to the point of this guy's an idiot, he just doesn't get it.
I know better than that.
Yeah, I mean, golly, I've been struggling with this for my whole life. He's telling me it's easy, Then be curious about that part of you. Why the rebellion? Why the disagreement? Why does it anger you so to hear that something you've been struggling with really is pretty easy? And I should add to that, under the guidance of somebody who knows what they're doing.
Of
Because you're not going to do this by yourself. You're not going to listen to this podcast and sit down and do this, right? Because again, you're a ninja at arguing with yourself. You're a ninja at shaming yourself. It doesn't just stop. I've practiced this approach for decades, and all day long there's some part of me, you know, being mean to me. The difference now is that when it happens, it's quickly caught and it's like, and then, "Oh, I'm sorry." That's the difference. Again, we're not shooting for perfection. It's not like, oh, okay, I'll learn to be nice to myself and then I'll always be nice to myself. Well, no, because as soon as you're not, you're going to beat the crap out of yourself. You're setting yourself up.
Right.
Then that goes back to the beginning of our conversation. You set this all or nothing standard, just like with the surveys. These companies set this all or nothing standard in order to make a judgment, which isn't a judgment. It's a way to shame and terrify our employees into doing it the way we want it done, which then will cause them to rebel against it and then cause the experience you had to sit there and go, please, please, you give me the highest rating. I mean, that's just so sad to me. And that's what I came away from. I've had a number of conversations with people who, like I said, jobs involve that survey, and I always come away going, how sad that feels to me to work under that. I check in with my clients, how's your therapy going? I'm not begging them for a 10.
Right.
If it's a 0, I really, really, really want to hear it, and I'm very happy. Gosh, the number of times a client has said, "There's something I want to talk to you about," and you're probably not going to want to hear this, or you're not going to be happy about this, or something, and they want to tell me that it's not working very well. I get really excited. I go, "That's great. That's great. Now I understand, more of what it is you're looking for, and I can help you achieve that, help
Right.
you go for that. Because if you don't say anything, I don't know."
Well, no, and that
Mhm.
therein lies the engagement, and they have an engaged party, even if
Right.
they're voicing a level of dissatisfaction. They're at least they're sharing their voice, or they're emboldened enough to have a voice.
Yeah, and I mean, go back to the survey. I mean, if a survey dropped the numbers and said, "Tell us about your experience,"
Yeah.
and if you were, thoughtful enough, you could go, "Oh, these folks were really very nice and did a good job. I expected, rather than they should have, done this," and you throw all of it in there. And it's taken in as, "Thank you very much. This is helpful, and let's discuss more about what you like, didn't like, what you'd like different. Maybe we can make some changes." And nobody was getting dinged.
Yeah.
Oh man, I just got this memory. There was a short-lived show called Undercover Boss.
Mhm.
You remember that show? Did you
I
watch
do,
that
yeah.
show?
Yeah, I
I
did.
watched a few episodes, and the one episode that stuck with me more than any was, at a restaurant, and I'll think of the name of the restaurant. It was kind of a takeoff on Hooters, and, the Tilted Kilt.
Mm,
And so the gals wear these little short, skirts and, kind of revealing tops, and there was one gal who was crossing the line with customers, and they're showing videos of how she's interacting. And I was in the restaurant business for a long time, and I'm like, she'd be gone in a heartbeat. And so anyway, the boss, he's working as a kitchen help or something. He sees what's going on, and oh man, this just chokes me up every time I tell this story. He connected her with a more experienced server, and so she got some training there, and then he learned from talking to her that she was the sole financial provider for a parent who was very, very, very ill
mm.
and had dropped out of college to take this job and help this parent. And he told her, he said, we failed in training you properly, not you're screwing up. And he said, so I'm going to connect you with this other server. I want you to get trained. And if all that goes well and you work here for, I think he gave her like some sort of period of time to kind of turn things around. He wound up paying for the rest of her college. That's the way people should be treated.
Mm.
You know? And he got curious about what was going on with her. He didn't just react, the way I reacted.
Right.
He sat down with her and he said, here's what's going on, and took responsibility for it, and then did what he could to help her out. And she really was a really good kid, really sharp, and I forget what she was studying in school. And I would love to know how she's doing, man.
Yeah.
As there's just no way in my mind that she threw all that away, and that didn't completely transform her life. So that's what we're shooting for here.
Yeah.
And she didn't know. I'm guessing that that's what she needed in life, was for somebody to hear her, see her, not shame her, and then help her. So.
Oh my gosh, we could certainly go down a rabbit hole of there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
There is.
But as we wrap up today's episode at about an hour, this was an interesting conversation with fingers of former episodes all over it. And the more you and I have these conversations, and hopefully the more our audience gets to know you and your perspective and your take on psychotherapy, which in my opinion is nothing short of amazing and empathetic and therapeutic in the truest sense of the word. Like the ability to just really work with someone to a better place, a place of understanding, a place of concern, from a place of concern to a place of understanding is just it's what that woman received, and it's what we all want. For me personally, and speaking just for me, a lot of that negative self-talk, a lot of the tantrums we talk about, a lot of the outbursts, the rage, the why me, the I'm not good enough, or I'll screw this up, or why the hell not me, or the fake masks we wear, all of that. It's all, in my opinion, a result of this longing for concern such that we have some understanding. And, I think for me personally, and perhaps maybe our audience, I think that we look at, in reference to how you thought, are you going to wear that today? Like a lot of this comes from how we were raised and whether or not we felt cared for, or I think if you asked our parents, they say, oh my gosh, I had more concern for you when you left the house than you could ever imagine. And I believe that that's true.
It is. They're not going, let me see, I could say to him, let's go look in your closet. How did you come to choose that for, to go with it? To be curious, or I could just, let him have it.
Yeah. But I think for some of us, and now that I'm a father and a husband, I see so much of what my dad or mom or anyone, it's just, it's human condition of, how do you take what's in your head and heart and express it in a way that's received properly by a 10-year-old?
Well, by having this experience that we've been talking about, to where you've been, so that you would almost naturally approach what your kids or anybody's doing that's upsetting to you. You would approach it with, tell me about that. Whatever, you could throw any example out, of what your kids would say that would just make you want to go, hey, you're not gonna, But if you go, "Oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Tell me about that." You know,
Hmm.
and to always be curious and not try to be implementing, "Let me straighten this kid out." "Let me get to know this kid a little bit more." Obviously, I don't know him as well as I think I do, at least in this moment, because I wouldn't have expected him to say that.
Yeah.
And I sure don't want him to say that, so I wanna be curious about that, not, "I'm gonna shut that down."
Nope. Seek first to understand. It's something that we've read and most of us have heard, but not exactly the easiest thing to practice, at least not by me. But, ladies and gentlemen, this has been, well, in my opinion, another compelling episode of Couch Trip Therapy for Everyday Life. And as we've often said, if this was of any inspiration to you or influenced you in any way to seek out a therapist, please feel free to ask us in the comments for any questions you may have, or email us, or seek a therapist who's active and has been in their own therapy. And if you're here in the Atlanta area, make sure you find Eddie Reece, because he's the best in my view. But we greatly appreciate your involvement. We love bringing you this information, inspiration, hopefully influence every single week, and we're going to keep coming back. So once again, folks, as we wrap, sincere gratitude both to you, Eddie, and to our listening and viewing audience, and all those that have supported us along the way. We really appreciate you, and please don't keep us a secret, and we'll keep coming back. So you're going to be hearing and seeing a lot more of us in the coming months as we go into the full promotion and kind of launch of what we've been doing for over the last year or more. So again, Eddie, any final words before we wrap?
Just throw some comments and subscribes out there. I'm not saying that because that's what every podcaster says. I'm saying it because that's what I really want. I want eventually for this podcast to be a dialogue. I want to hear from folks. I want to hear what they think. And I'm very curious as to what they think about all this. I'm very curious as to what anybody has to say, and I made all this stuff up in a sense, from making a big stew out of everything I've learned and experienced. And I have no idea whether I'm really right about any of this stuff, but it seems to work for me and the folks I sit with, and so yeah, I really do want to get some feedback. We have been at this for quite a while, and my desire for that kind of feedback grows. So I've got to get busy with it and help get the
Yeah,
word out there too. But yeah, I appreciate you helping me out with this, Billy, and I look forward to hearing from some listeners.
absolutely. Yep. And who knows, there might be an in-person event coming soon. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been the latest episode of Couch Trip Therapy for Everyday Life. That's the one and only Eddie Reece. My name's Billy Courtright, and we will be back again next week. Bye for now.
Bye.